first.
Okay.
Just want to say, Bill Sand, right here.
Hello, you all.
Bill Sand and
70 years old, 16 at the Woodstock Music Festival.
Thank you for coming today. And do I have your permission to put this on the YouTube channel, Hippie Stories?
You certainly do. I like my story to get out. I'm rather proud of it.
I'm shutting my phone off. Learned that the last time.
Gotcha.
Anyway, I'm so tickled and happy because I know you. You're a friend of mine. We'd share music together.
Yes.
We've practiced in the bus, have we not?
We have, and I've enjoyed every second.
And can I show your hat a little closer? It's such a cool hat. So he's got an embroidered, I don't know if I'm doing this right here, but I don't know if you can see it. It's really cool. And a cool hippie shirt.
Yes.
Let's see what your hippie shirt says.
Lager Rhythms.
Nice.
Which is lager is a style of beer. Not many people get the shirt.
Okay.
A logarithm,
right.
is a term.
It's
So logarithm.
yeah.
Thank you.
So I would just like you to be you and just share as you will.
Okay. Well, it's a story I have been telling frequently since I left the music festival in 1969, so my memories are crystal clear because I've told the story nonstop. So my story starts that I have a friend, Gary, who I still am very close with, and Gary had a mother who was rather cool in her day. In 1969, she was kind of beatnik-like, was a term back then, kind of pre-hippie, and she used to read a newspaper that I think might still be in print. It's called The Village Voice.
Woo, I remember that.
And the Village Voice refers to Greenwich Village, which was always kind of a bohemian, cool part of the Manhattan scene. So she spotted an ad that said, hiring laborers for up-and-coming rock festival in Bethel, New York. And while we did know about the Woodstock Festival, and we did know all the artists, because Gary and I were frequently attending the Fillmore East, where most of those bands had played, but we weren't paying much attention to it because the news was always, it's been canceled, it's been run out of town. Until the last minute, it seemed like it wasn't going to come together, so we were not getting excited about it because it seemed like a fantasy. Anyway, Gary's mom spotted the ad and asked Gary if he might want to go up there because they were paying what was good money at the time. I don't remember what that figure was. $4 an hour is a guess. But she thought, great way to get Gary off the streets of New York City for the summer and have him make a little money. And he was enthusiastic. She wisely asked him, maybe you have a friend might want to do it as well. He said, well, my buddy Billy is likely. So he asked me, and I asked my mom, and my mom was thrilled at the idea of getting rid of me for a little while because I was full-blown hippied out and I knew everything, and I was a difficult kid, and she needed a break. So she sent me to Woodstock. So when we got to the festival, which was, I'm not sure if it was somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks before the official festival. And when we got there, we were able to drive in Gary's mom's 1964 Buick Wildcat convertible with the top down.
What color was
It was a white car. It was a white convertible with a valve lifter tick. Only I would know that, as I'm an auto mechanic. And I remember that it ticked all the way up there and it ticked all the way back. But in any event, when we got there was only about 5 tents pitched at the site. So we had the luxury of driving right up to where we were going to spend the festival.
Nice.
Got our tent out. Gary had this amazing tent that his father had gotten from the military. It was like a circus tent. It was round, it was huge, and you had to cut yourself down a tree for a center pole.
Wow.
So we pitched this pretty big tent, just Gary and I, in this 15-person tent easily.
Wow.
And that first night was in some ways the most memorable of the entire experience for me. As I said, there was about 5 other tents pitched. And in one of those tents was a band. And that band was not well known enough to be invited to play at Woodstock, but they were from New York City. And the name of that band was David Peel and the Lower East Side. And they actually had a record out that was kind of a real hippie protest song, and they loved singing about pot. And the name of the album was Have a Marijuana. And they had a song that had a chorus that went, up against the wall, motherfucker, which referred to, you know, a cop sees you smoking a little pot, up against the wall, motherfucker. That's the way it was.
Okay.
So these guys, now I got to mention, Gary and I were 16 years old. It seemed to me the average age of people who attended that festival was mid-20s. I'd say 20 to 30 was probably 90% of the people there, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
We were kind of young. And that was the age of David Peel and his Lower East Side. Now, one thing a lot of people don't know is that hippies were very anti-alcohol at the time, because we loved our pot, and we were outraged that we would see drunks stumbling down the street with a bottle in the hand, and a cop would walk right past them and not give them a second look. But boy, you had a tiny amount of marijuana and you were up against the wall, motherfucker. So we were very anti-alcohol, and we were not drinking. And not just that we were 16, the hippies were not into alcohol. And I just got to make a footnote that a young genius friend of mine today, he's in his 20s now, in 2023, made the observation after watching the Woodstock movie and all the conversations that one of the main reasons that that festival was so peaceful was because of the absence of alcohol. It just, I won't say there was none there. I met somebody who had a concession nearby and said he sold a bunch of beer, but I'm telling you, there was almost no alcohol, and that had a lot to do with why there was no belligerence and no fighting. Anyway, contrary to what I'm saying about alcohol, David Peel on the Lower East Side had these jugs of El Cheapo wine. They were 5-gallon jugs, I think. Or maybe they were 1-gallon jugs, I'm sorry. They were 1-gallon jugs. That's what they were. And it was Bally High at the time, one of the cheapest, most god-awful wines you could ever have. And they had dumped a whole bunch of LSD in every one of those bottles. Now, they didn't tell anyone, but they didn't have to. We knew. We just knew if they're drinking wine, it's got something in it, because the hippies were not drinking wine to drink wine. So they were passing around these bottles, and Gary and I happily indulged, and we made a big campfire. Now, I got to say, with the 5 tents that were there, they were all New York City kids, including us. At this point, they weren't showing up from all over the country. This was New York City, hippies, and we'd pretty much never had the freedom to make an outdoor campfire. And now, here we were, anything goes. So we had a blaze going. We made a giant fire pit just with rocks and had this blaze going, and David Peel and his band were jamming out with guitars and bongos. And
May I interrupt you?
Please.
So where in the field were you set up?
Okay, we were not in the field.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I forget the name of the road right now, but when you basically, there was a designated campground in the beginning, and we were in it. And the way you got there is when you came in on Hurd Road, is it?
Yeah.
When you came into Hurd Road and got to that intersection where the monument now stands, and you hang a right, and then in a very short distance there was a left. And right off of that left, on the left side, was the designated campground.
Nice.
It was high ground, and what was nice about it, for one thing, with the high ground and the rains that came, stayed rather dry, but also we could see the side of the stage from where we were. Now, it was kind of far away, but I had 16-year-old eyeballs. And 16-year-old eyeballs can see a long way real clear. Not like 70-year-old eyeballs with glasses and can't see squat. So we could see the side of the stage where we could hear it real well. So we were playing for hours and hours. We were jamming out to Up Against the Wall, Motherfucker. I'm sorry, I won't say that again. I realize that's enough.
I have to ask, is
Please.
this band still around? Is
I don't know if they're still around.
Okay.
But
we'll research that.
But they definitely come up. You
They
put them in,
do?
they absolutely come up.
I would love to connect with them.
Okay, yeah. It'd be
Anyway.
interesting what they remember, if
Yeah.
anything.
So
So we
cool.
were having a good old time screaming and just singing along and being just plain wild and free. And probably about 2, 3 in the morning, we all crawled into our tents for a nice 2 or 3 hours of sleep. At that age, you could get away with it. The next morning, we were awakened to the sound of a motorcycle. Now, I have always loved motorcycles, so I happen to remember this guy pulled up on an English motorcycle. It was a BSA 441 Victor, English bike, beautiful looking bike. And on his bike was this guy. He was not wearing a shirt. He was wearing a suede frilly vest. He had this incredible mane of curly hair. He was probably about mid-20s, handsome as could be. And me and my 16-year-old buddy, we were looking at him and thinking, when I grow up and I'm 25, boy, I hope I look like that. Because this guy was a sight to behold. And he gets off the bike and introduces himself. Hello, I'm Michael Lang. And this is my Woodstock Festival. And I'm putting it all together. And I want to thank you guys for volunteering. We're going to start building the stage. But I have an announcement to make. There's been one change of plans. And we said, what is that? And he said, we're not paying anybody.
Okay.
So we looked at him like, what? Why not? And he points over to this group of, I don't know, 10 or 20-something-year-old, long-haired looking professional carpenters who had volunteered to build the stage. Now, we were a bunch of hippies that didn't even know which end of the hammer you hold. We were just, we were there to be laborers. And he had the guys to build the stage that he needed. Mm-hmm. He said, I really apologize. In fact, we don't even need your help. But because you're all here, you're certainly welcome to stay for the duration of the show. So here we are, strategically located with about a week or so to kill. And we could not have been happier. So the strangest part is neither Gary nor I remember eating one bite of food from the minute we got there to the minute we left a week or 2 later. We seemed to survive without food pretty good. We did have pot. We did smoke it. And we killed the time. And the place was not filling up. This is, I think, very important that there was hardly anyone there for the entire construction period until Thursday. The festival was scheduled for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, August 15, 16, 17. It was on that Thursday that I was laying in a field, smoking pot, staring up at the clouds, thinking, I got it made. And I started to hear a weird noise. And as I got up and looked around, the noise was a sea of people converging on the site from absolutely 360 degrees. They were coming out of the woods. They were coming across lawns. They were paddling across ponds. And what had happened is the place got gridlocked instantly. All these people showed up, so traffic stopped immediately on that Thursday. So
What time was this, I'm wondering about?
Yeah. I would say this was Thursday afternoon. If I had to pick a time,
Yeah.
I'd say 3 in the afternoon,
Okay.
right around then. Because, most of these people, as I say, they were in their 20s. Mm-hmm. They had jobs.
Yeah.
They had to coordinate, so they were coming for the weekend.
Yeah.
Maybe they got off a day early.
Yeah.
And So right there, their Woodstock experience was very different than ours because we were already living there like we owned the place.
Yeah.
Most of these people had to abandon their cars. They had to walk long distances.
Yeah.
So when I say what a great time I had, I had it made by getting there early. There's a lot of people that didn't have a good time there, and
Or don't remember the time then.
yeah, well, that's true.
That's what I hear
That's
a
what
lot.
they say, but I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of that. I think that whole thing that if you remember Woodstock, you weren't there. I've heard people make that silly statement,
Yeah.
and I want to just really say something about drugs and Woodstock,
Okay.
and that is that maybe this is a rationalization as somebody who has smoked pot my whole life pretty much. All the kids there, they were a bunch of pot smokers, and if you think that that's using drugs, then okay. There was an element of LSD there. I guarantee not 1% of the people attending were under the influence of LSD. I doubt it was 1 in 100. Don't forget there was 500,000. So if there's 1 in 100, there's a lot of people on LSD, but it's still 1%. That was absolutely the limit. There were no powders. There were no needles. There was no hustling. So it was not rampant drugs and sex, as I've heard people who are anti-Woodstock say.
Okay.
A lot of pot, a little bit of LSD, nothing else. The sex part, if you think that a bunch of beautiful 20-year-olds bathing naked in a pond is sex, then you live in a different world than I do. I will say there was definitely rampant nudity.
Yeah.
But rampant sex, no way. I was there the whole time. I saw one couple screwing. One couple screwing in the entire time I was there. So
Did you see any kids by any chance?
quite a few people came with kids. There was this real element of hippies coming from like New Mexico and what do they call them? Where these people, what's that word? God.
Immigrate?
No.
Not immigrate.
For where people all live together.
Oh, communal?
Commune. I'm sorry. That's the word I was looking for. They were like, a lot of people came in buses who lived in
and
communes all over the country.
Interesting.
And they had lots of kids and they had magic buses. Not as nice as Debbie's, but they had their magic buses, and there was quite a bit of children there. I mean, although, a tiny minority, but definitely an element of children.
So you're laying there Thursday afternoon, 3 p.m. ish, and you hear the sea of buzzing of people converging.
Yes.
Then what did you do?
Well, I said, holy shit, this is going to be a party. And, I went back to my tent and, talking to Gary about it. And it was rather strange how many people, friends of mine from my neighborhood, kids I was going to school with, I was still in high school, found each other. It was just amazing.
What's Gary's last name?
Gary is Gary Malinowski.
Okay.
And so we ended up having at least 10 other friends stay in our tent with us. We had the hot spot, and we would meander into the crowd, and then when we had enough of, it was almost like an escape to get back to our tent. We were able to escape the madness because we had this homestead.
Maybe one day we can go out there. You can show me where you were.
Actually, exactly where we were.
Nice. We'll
And
do
it was
that
funny
one day.
because I was recently interviewed by the Bethel Woods, and I told them where I remembered we had pitched our tent, and they had a map, and they said here, and I said that's exactly where, and they said, well, that was the designated camping area. So I would be very happy to show you where that was.
Oh, thank you.
So from there on, I got to tell you, the music was incredible.
Yes, the music.
Some of the best bands actually had lousy performances. And some bands that you wouldn't even expect it to be show stealers were show stealers.
How about that?
To give an explanation why that occurred is an interview by Arlo Guthrie, where he says that he got there and He got there on Friday, and they said, you're playing on Sunday. And he said, that sounds great. And so he said, well, I'm not playing for 2 days. I can drink all I want, I can smoke all I want, and I can do whatever the heck I want. So he got himself really, really, really toasted. And on Saturday, while he was flying high, they said, Arlo, you're up. And he was like, what? You're on. So he said when he went up on the stage, he said, I was so smashed. So Arlo, fortunately, has a style of music that he was just fine. But a lot of the artists complained that they were not prepared to get on the stage when they were suddenly informed you're up next. So highlights, in my opinion, of the best music at Woodstock. Number one, I got to say, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and they did have Neil Young join them. He was not an official member yet, but I remember they did a few songs, and then they said, we'd like to introduce our friend Neil Young. And he came out and they did a song called Sea of Madness, which was a great song. But Crosby, Stills, and Nash had a unique situation that they were brand spanking new. In fact, Stephen Stills is famous for his thing that he gets on the stage and he says, thanks for having us. We're scared shitless. And there was something about cursing at Woodstock over the microphone to 500,000 kids. It empowered us kids. We were like, instead of getting our mouths washed out with soap, we were like, it was an empowerment to hear these words through a 1,000-watt PA system. So he said, this is the second time we've ever played together. We're scared shitless.
Wow.
And they opened up with that sweet Judy Blue Eyes. And they just blew us away because they had a unique style. The harmonies were incredible. And I think they captured the feeling of Woodstock better than any other band that played there. There was also a moment where Country Joe and the Fish came out.
Yeah.
And Country Joe and the Fish have a song, it's called the Fish Chant or the Fish something like that. And he always starts off by, give me an F, give me an I, give me an S, give me an H. And to the audience, what's that spell? Fish, what's that spell? Well, he had to play with us. He'd come out and he'd go, give me an F, give me a U.
Oh, here we go.
Give me a C, give me a K, what's that spell? And I just got to tell you that I never saw 500,000 kids have so much fun and yelling, fuck. 500,000 strong yelling, fuck. Was so,
in a good way.
Yeah, it was so empowering.
Raised the vibration, did it not?
Oh, it did. It was fantastic. So other acts that were my favorite, I mean, nobody was better than Santana. And you see it in, there is a Woodstock movie. Santana, they were off the scale. They just, I would say they might have given the best performance.
Carlos Santana.
Yes.
And he's one of the few that's been returning year after year, that's still around and kicking it, along with John Fogerty, and there's a couple of them
There
that
is.
are still, God willing, are still alive and still.
Amen. And some sounding good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, Woodstock's biggest heroes of keeping the feeling going was Richie Havens and Melanie.
Yeah.
They really, I mean, they came every year. And in fact,
yes, they did.
Richie Havens, when he passed away some 5-10 years ago, they actually flew a helicopter over the site and dropped his ashes.
Well, I remember that day because I showed up, and by the monument they had his guitar there on display. The family allowed it to be on display so we could touch the guitar.
Oh, I didn't know
strum,
that.
And it was there for anyone. And then there was a nice circle gathering on the field in the upper quadrant there where the peace sign is usually carved out in the grass, where they actually did the ashes and the flyover, and it was just so magical.
Magical. And by the way, when I was at that little ceremony for Richie Havens, Michael Lang was there. And first time in my life, I got to talk to him after the festival. And I asked him, I said, so what about your BSA 441 Victor? He said, I still have it. I said, do you ride it? He goes, heck no. That thing almost broke my leg trying to start it when I was a kid. And I sure wouldn't try to start it now, but I have it. So I thought that was kind of cute. By the way, originally Melanie was slated to open Woodstock, and she said, "I'm not going out there till my mother gets here."
Oh,
And
really?
so they scrambled around, and Richie Havens said, "I'll open it up."
Ah.
And so I do remember Richie Havens. It was quite a scene. He started the music. He came out, and he was strumming on his guitar, but he wasn't amplified. As you see him, but you couldn't hear a thing. And he's strumming and strumming, and then he gets up to the microphone, and they were miking the guitar. It wasn't wired. It wasn't an electric guitar. It was an acoustic guitar. And he got that guitar close to the mic. And,
Wow.
and he's strumming so hard. And he had such a unique style. These gigantic hands. His thumb would come around the neck so far.
I think he was a drop D tune or something like that. Because,
yeah, you're right.
Because my friend Robert Tellefson plays the same style. He's like a protege, and he mimics the Richie Havens style.
No kidding.
And he does, he's still playing everywhere and stuff.
Oh, nice.
I was going to ask you, where in the field were you when you witnessed the bands
Oh,
playing?
I was right in front of the stage.
Right.
Because I was moving around.
Nice.
And, there was room to walk.
So you got a good spot.
Oh, I always had a good spot. But also the amplification was so incredible. And also being so young and having such great vision that, maybe if I went back, if I could see a film of myself now, I'd be like, wow, I was really that far back. But I could see so clearly.
Were you there for all the bands?
Darn close to it.
How about Jefferson Airplane, Janis Joplin?
Oh, yeah. Well, Jefferson Airplane.
Sly and the Family Stone. I'm just so curious about every band.
Well, there are bands I didn't see. I didn't see The Dead, and I didn't see The Band, two of my favorites.
Yes.
Both had notoriously bad performances. This is a fact.
Okay.
Neither of them were in the movie because their performances were so bad.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Never knew that.
So I don't know what happened there. But Jefferson Airplane had the pleasure of opening up Sunday morning. In fact, they open up where Gracie Slick famously says, "Good morning, people." And they go into Volunteers of America. Remember it like it was yesterday.
Wow.
And it was a great way to wake up. And that was the Sunday morning.
Wow.
Other acts, though, that were just incredible. The Who
Yes.
were the only band from England at Woodstock.
Really?
It was all American.
What about, Cocker, Joe Cocker?
Right, well, Joe Cocker. He's English. You're right.
But did you see him by any chance?
Oh, my God. Joe Cocker's performance, he was one of the best there. Absolutely incredible.
I get chills just hearing you talk about this.
Yeah, he had Leon Russell up there
I'm
with him.
seeing the concert through your eyes right now. Thank you for
Thank
that.
you. Oh, my pleasure.
Because I was only 3 years old at the time.
Too young.
What else? Tell me more about the music. Any other things that you can think of?
Things, The Who gave this incredible performance. Joe Cocker's performance was amazing. One of the best, who's not well known, was 10 Years After.
Oh, yeah.
They always showed this clip of them doing a song called Going Home. And it is one of the most incredible live performances ever recorded. Anybody who has not seen the Woodstock movie must, because it'll give you a better idea than what I could ever do. It's really quite fantastic.
What about the Rains? What was the situation that you encountered when they started to rain?
The Rains were short-lived, but they were a real nuisance because there were so many people there that it was a field that had been mowed. But once it got wet and trampled, that's when it turned into mud. That ruined it for a lot of people because I would say the majority of people, they didn't have a campsite. They just found the spot in that huge field in front of that stage, and that was their spot. So for them, it was pretty rough. I had the luxury to go to the high ground in my tent. I think I had a cot. I had something on legs, and I wasn't.
You were dry.
I was dry.
How about Wavy Gravy Hog Farm folks? Tell us about that.
Well, they were about the coolest thing ever. I think they were from New Mexico, and they were serving some weird kind of vegetarian something or other. It was like a stew, a vegetable stew or something. It was incredible to get to it. You had to walk through the woods. I only went once, so this one I'm not that sharp on. I've been asked if I could point out the spot. The answer is no, I could not. It was just like going through the woods. They had little tags on trees, follow the yellow brick road. And when you got there, there was a line, and all these hippies, they were spooning out this weird goulash. And so that was one of the few sources of food. But, I mean, they were just very cool and added to the whole alien feel to the whole thing.
How about Max Yasgur? Did you hear him?
I absolutely heard every word
Tell
that
us
he
about
said.
Max.
All right, well, I mean, it gives me chills the way he came up there, and his first 3 words were, "I'm a farmer." The crowd goes wild. He could have said, "Free food for the rest of your life," and not gotten more of applause. Those hippies, most of them were city kids, and the grass is always greener on the other side. And they all had visions, being a farmer and living in the country is where it's at. I've learned since that being a farmer is one of the most brutally difficult jobs.
Tough life.
Really tough life.
You never get a break. You're always working.
You never get a break.
Yeah.
The cows do not say it's Christmas. You don't have
There's
to milk me.
always work to do. 24/7.
Non-stop. So, but, he said, "I'm a farmer." They went crazy. And I remember his speech. It was short and sweet. He said, "I don't know how to address a room of 20 people, let alone a crowd of 400,000. But you kids have showed the world today something, that 400,000 people, 400,000 kids can get together and have fun and music and have nothing but fun and music." That was his speech. And
That was amazing.
I mean, we were just bonkers. So,
And if he didn't say yes because 2 others said no, if he didn't say yes, then he was so instrumental in this whole.
well, he defied everything. The town was totally against
Yeah.
it. And I don't think they really had full approval.
Yeah.
And
It just turned into what it turned into, right?
yeah, it was an accident.
It
It
had a life of its own at that point.
And by the way, they were putting a fence up that they were going to, regulate people giving tickets. Not one person that attended that festival ever surrendered their ticket. They all have them for souvenirs. And the truth of the matter is they never completed the fence. So you didn't have to break in to get in. There was a few areas where they had put bogus fences up, and they got trampled in about 3 seconds.
Do you remember that there was a point at which they had to repair the electric lines because the rubber was worn away and by feet walking over it so much?
I didn't know
Do you
about that.
recall that?
No, I don't recall that.
Okay.
But there certainly were periods where the music went silent
That's what
for long periods.
Okay.
But
I was just curious.
I don't
'cause
remember the explanation.
That was why, because I know they were trying to pick the right time to do so. It was a repair that needed to be, because of electric issues,
Right.
to be safe. And
Yes.
they didn't want the crowd to go too crazy and stay silent too long. So it was a walking that dance, that fine line of
Right.
how can we do it, who can do it, when are we going to turn it off and do this repair? Yeah, I
Gotcha.
just wondered if you were familiar. But you're.
No, that one I missed.
What about, let's see, on Saturday, I think it was Saturday or Friday night, the town produced a flyer that gave information so that everyone could be safe with regard to water, bathing, garbage. Don't run naked in the hot sun. If you're going to run naked, do it in the shade. Stay away from brown acid and all this.
What did they do? Drop it out of a helicopter?
Well,
that I don't recall.
That's what I was wondering, if you remember this flyer going around, because they handed it out and
Yeah.
they posted it.
I don't. That I don't recall.
What about the areas where they posted messages, right? Did you ever, there's like designated spots where people hung
No, but
notes? Do you recall
mostly
that?
it was just, a lot over the PA system.
Oh, okay.
It would be,
Yeah.
Debbie Fisher, please call your mother. She's worried about you. I mean, it was endless.
And of course there's no cell phones then.
No.
And how do you call your mother?
Yeah.
You got to get to a payphone, right?
That's right.
What about the helicopter? Any other things?
Well, there
The
was a lot of
helicopters coming
helicopter
in and
travel.
out?
Yeah, that was nonstop. That's how all the musicians were getting in and out. I will fast forward to Monday morning. Now, the festival was supposed to be over Sunday evening,
Yeah.
but it ran late. And on Monday morning, the strangest thing to me was that When I woke up on Monday morning and went down to the field where the last act was going to play, and that was Mr. Jimi Hendrix, uh, 80% of the crowd was gone.
Yeah.
They vanished on that Sunday night. They just vanished. I didn't even see them leaving because where I was, they weren't going past me. So it was a little bit scary when I got to that field on Monday morning. The field was destroyed. You couldn't tell what rough shape it was in because it was covered by people and blankets and sleeping bags. But a lot of people abandoned, whatever they brought, which wasn't much. And it was a real mess. And so Jimmy got to play for a relatively small crowd. He did a great set. Now I'm just giving my own personal opinion that, straying a little from the Woodstock thing, Jimi Hendrix had two aspects to his career from what I saw. He started off as the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and he had two musicians that he hooked up with in England, Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell on drums. And I saw the Jimi Hendrix Experience with that clientele several times. I loved them. I loved their albums. Jimmy decided that he didn't want to play with them anymore shortly before Woodstock. I mean, like weeks or months before Woodstock. And he fired the bass player, Noel Redding. He did hang on to Mitch Mitchell, but he got together with a bunch of other musicians. And they were black, and they were great musicians, Billy Cox, Buddy Miles. But I think they all started doing heroin. And I really think that the Jimi Hendrix Experience was smoking a lot of pot and giggling and having a lot of fun. And that was the vibe when they played. When he played with what became the Band of Gypsies, they just seemed like they were strung out on heroin. He was much more serious. He was still a phenomenal musician. But I think his music became less fun. And I didn't think that, I wasn't thrilled with the performance at Woodstock, but he did do a couple of those spectacular things with the Star-Spangled Banner, and he showed that he is one of the greatest guitar players that ever lived. On that, there was no question. But I enjoyed other performances I'd seen of him. So ironically, we stayed for another day or two, and believe it or not, Gary's mother came back in her Buick Wildcat convertible and drove right over to where we were camped, and we broke down our tent. And
Unbelievable,
we went
Bill.
home.
Bill, this is like phenomenal.
Well, it was a great.
What a story.
Well, thank you.
This is phenomenal. So maybe if you have any thoughts later, write them down, and we'll do a round two. If there's more details or anything you would like to add or share,
I think whatever I have
because
forgotten.
the video will be posted, you can listen to it, and
Great.
And I'd love to do a follow up, and also maybe that day we can visit where you were.
I would look forward to that.
We can meet at the site.
Okay.
Do a walkabout.
We'll go right there. I can show you what I remember. I want to add also one little memory I have that's just kind of silly. There was this beautiful half-naked gal. She looked like Pocahontas.
Oh.
And she had a can of peas. Peas. And as you were walking past her, she would say, "Would you like a pea? Would you like a pea?" And she fed the whole place. I think
one pea at a time?
One pea. You could not have two. Because there was no food, and she wanted
to share.
She wanted democracy.
That's beautiful.
And everybody had one pea. Man,
But
I had that pea.
you
I
had
was
a pea.
stuffed after that pee.
Okay, well, I heard about stories about folks, their wells ran dry. They're looking for water. And did you ever find yourself hungry or thirsty that you recall?
Well, that's the strangest thing that I remember so much, but I don't remember eating or drinking.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I think it
Just
just had
curious.
to do with being 16 years
Yeah.
old and being pretty indestructible.
And it's something about the spirit being fortified, right?
Yes.
The spirit was fortified, and so therefore you were on like a high. I think folks might have been on this kind of high where
Oh, yes.
a little bit of food went a long way, maybe.
I think so. It was so much fun. I'm trying to think of the right word. It was validating. The fact that all these like-minded people got together was just incredible. You know, you really felt like you were onto something.
And amid the backdrop of the Vietnam War too, like I think it was a statement of we're tired of death, we're tired of fighting, right? It's like
make love, not war.
It's just
That's for sure.
yeah.
But sadly, it did not last long. And even Joni Mitchell, who wrote that great Woodstock song, even though she wasn't there, you know, I've seen her interviewed a lot. It was a fleeting moment. It just, everything came together.
Yeah.
They tried to duplicate it. It was less than a year later. They had a big festival at Altamont.
Yeah, and some folks
People got
died.
killed, and
But I have to say, it was one of those fleeting moments that galvanized time. It was a moment that changed all moments because it was a successful sort of, in many ways, a loving statement like Max Yasgur shared. That's something, isn't it? It's something to be celebrated, and that's really why I'm so grateful for you to come and share this story. That I'm just trying to build that vibration of that moment and hearing what folks have to say, good, bad, or indifferent. I know some, like you mentioned earlier, some of the local folks did not like the festival. Understandably so. I mean, you could imagine why.
Yeah, their lives was disrupted like never before and never again.
The town's concerns, you know, the town had valid concerns about safety. I mean, but somehow, God willing, thank God, it all went without too much of a. I mean, I did hear it took many years to clean up and recover the land. That was like sort of a.
The field got beaten pretty good.
That was a thing.
Absolutely. But I do have to say, most importantly, that the vibe of Woodstock has endured to this day, and the best proof of that is someone like Debbie, because she was not there, and here she is with her magic bus, always looking beautiful, and definitely.
Sweet. Thank you.
I mean this with all my heart. That's what it did. It left a spirit that has continued. And you are the ultimate in proof of it in every way.
Bill, I'm a music fan. You know, I started writing songs when I was 7, and it was a way of coping with the challenges. And so, of course, you know, that's, for me, there's that big music tie. The music, even though, you know, what it evolved into my music journey, what I listened to as a young girl, and leading up to landing here 33 years ago. And like, oh, how do I navigate my life here in this rural setting where you really have to work hard to get your fun in, you know, or figure out how you fit into this farmland, and you need a car and don't always have the money to get it going. And so music, right? Music was the bonding, you know, the one thing that ties us somehow, grounds us all and heals us all. You find a way to jam and get together and keep your spirits up, you know. So that's really like huge statement is the music and the magical, spiritual, sacred essence of this land here in Sullivan County. It's really mountains of just little nooks and crannies of lots of pockets of folks who get together and share music. And of course the Woodstock site is one of the biggest little pockets nestled in the mountains there.
Yes, and thank you, Alan Gary, for putting that museum in and saving that land so we could still talk about it.
And his lovely wife Sandra too. Sandra and Alan, the two of them are so nice. Such a great couple who kept everything, is really preserved it in such a beautiful way. So
I think the word that I take away from my experience at Woodstock that reigns supreme is kindness. You know, there's so little kindness in the world, but it absolutely took over there. Everybody was so considerate to everybody else. They were considerate to the police. They just, for a moment, everybody became nice and cared about the person next to you. And,
no negativity.
There was just no
The
negativity.
was just sort of disintegrated away, right?
Yeah. People were nice
So-
to each other.
On that note, Bill, thank you for sharing the love.
You're very welcome. Thank you for letting me tell my story.
You're the best. Mwah, thank you. And we will revisit a second episode, God willing.
Okay. Hopefully I'll
Take
think
care,
of something.
folks.
Thank you for
Keep
your
the love
time.
alive.
Peace.
Woo!